Okay, we left off over here at the Gemara on Samach Vavam and Beis. Rav is bringing proof to his position that if a Eid Echad comes and says Zinsa Ishto, his wife committed adultery, and he remained silent. So Rav says, even if he remained silent, his wife is permitted him. Abai says no. He says, I'll bring a proof to this. That none. Again, just as an introduction, because we ended with this yesterday, there's a Mishnah in Mikvos. A mikvah is measured, that's 40 so, which is a sufficient amount of water. Person's tamei, he goes to the mikvah, immerses himself. Sometime after, not right after it's measured, let's say a week later. And meantime, he engages in tyrus. He touches truma, he touches kochim, many things. And then they measure the mikvah. After he went, and they find out it's deficient. Doesn't have sufficient water. So now we have a question. When he immersed himself, did it still have the sufficient amount of water? Therefore, it was a valid tefillah. So whatever he touched or he came in contact with is not tamei because he was tar. Or do we say, no, since I find the mikveh deficient today, it may have been deficient yesterday and 3 days ago, and even at the time when he immersed himself. So if that's the case, he's tamei. So what is the status of the tyrus? Of whatever he touched? That's the shot question. Do I go after what we call chazok meikora since initially? So like this. The Gemara says in Ksubis, in Chulin, the story is a man marries a woman, presumably she's a virgin. She's a basula. A woman's born a basula, so she remains a basula until something happens to change that fact, that she's no longer a basula. She can either have an accident, which is called mukas eitz, or because she engaged with a man, so therefore she's no longer a basula. Okay? So a man marries a woman. There's the interim period, 12 months from the kiddushin to the nisuin. He goes, consummates the marriage. He says she's not a basula. So therefore, he's not accusing her that she committed adultery. But he says, maybe initially when I married her, when I did the kiddushin, she was a bula. She was not a basula. She was not a virgin. If that's the case, the ksuba is of a lesser value. Ksuba of a basula is double of what the ksuba of a bula is. A woman's not a virgin. So she says, there's tani namasti, that after the erisin, after the kiddushin, I was raped, or mukaseitzani, that's the reason why I'm no longer a basula. So what do? So the Gemara says it's an argument. But according to one opinion in the Mishnah, we have a chazokah meikora. We have an initial presumed status. She was born a virgin, and she remains a virgin until we find out that there was a change. So now we find she's a bula. But I say, just as she's a bula now, she's not a virgin now. Maybe she wasn't a virgin going back even prior to kiddushin. So the Gemara says, whenever you have a chazokah dahashto, a present state, and a previous state, the previous state overrides the present state. We always follow chazokah meikora, always the original state. So when do we say it happened? It happened the last moment possible. So therefore, our whole discussion is pre-kiddushin, post-kiddushin. I say it happened after kiddushin. That's when she lost her virginity, and therefore the ksuba is 200. He has to pay the ksuba spasula. That's it. So over here, the mikveh originally had a cheskes kashrus. We measured it 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, it had 40 so. And now I have a chazokah dahashta, I find it's deficient. So I say, well, just as it's deficient today, maybe it's deficient, we go all the way back to the time when it was measured. And since he went to the mikveh after it was measured, he may have gone to a mikveh he went to a mikveh that definitely was deficient. But since I have a chazokah meikora, I have the original status that it was a valid mikveh because it had sufficient water. Going forward, that should override the presse. It became deficient the last moment possible. So it was the last moment possible. So when he went to the mikveh, right? So he immersed himself in the kosher mikveh. Therefore, he's tor. That's if I only deal with the mikveh independent of himself. That the chazokah rules on the mikveh. The mikveh is kosher. Therefore, the mikveh he immersed himself in was a kosher mikveh. Except here, I have another problem. Because he himself has a chazokah meikora. He himself has a cheskes tumah. He initially, before he went to the mikveh, he was contaminated. So the question is, did his state of contamination, did it change? Right? So like this is the way we explained it. The whole discussion of the mikveh, whether it has 40 saw or not, what is it relevant to? It's relevant to his status. It's not an independent question. It's in relation to people who use the mikveh. So therefore, you have to look at everything simultaneously. You look at the person's state, and you look at the mikveh state. The mikveh has a chazaka meikara, an initial presumed status that it was valid. The man himself has a chazaka meikara that he was tamei. So now I have a question: does he retain his original presumed status that he's still contaminated? So now we have an issue here. I have two chazaka meikaras. I have two presumed statuses. I have the mikveh's presumed status. I have his presumed status, and I have a present deficiency in the mikveh. So the Gemara says in Nida, the way it explains the Mishnah, it's called Tarti L'Reusa. I have two chazokas which are negative, and therefore the two override the one, and therefore we rule he's tummy. And everything he came in contact is contaminated. That's the ruling. It's called, that's one interpretation. It's called Tarti L'Reusa. It's a double negative. Because it's a double negative, we have two negatives saying that there's contamination, we contaminate everything. In fact, we'll see in a moment that's Reb Kiva's position. There's another interpretation, which is very interesting understanding. The story of the Basula. Now, the transition from virgin to non-virgin, it's one moment. The one woman was a virgin a moment ago. She became a non-virgin because of what happened, the event that happened. When a mikveh loses its water, is it in a moment? It's a gradual event. Even if you have 45 so. It's gradually losing water. So can I say it happened a moment ago? It's chosev asoy. It's a continuous diminishment. So since the meaning, chazaka is exeris hakosov. How do you know you go after presumed status? We learned from, the Gemara says you learn from the goyim, from the laws of leprosy. It has to be a certain size. The moment it crosses that threshold from one size to another, then the person becomes a leper. So the Gemara says maybe that transition happened when the person was sequestered, when he was quarantined. Maybe it happened. I have a chazaka. I have a chazaka that since the person, it was this particular size when he went in, the presumption is it didn't change when he was in there, when he was quarantined. Okay, but over there the change is a moment change. It goes from A to B. Here it's a gradual process. So because it's a gradual process, we don't follow the laws of chazaka. So it's something which is specific to mikveh, because it's a gradual deficiency. But again, because it's a process, it's an event which causes that to happen. It's not one act which causes the change. That's why I can't go after the chazaka meikara. Chazaka meikara can only rule to say it happened at a certain moment. But since this is a process which ultimately brings it about, therefore we can't apply the principle of chazaka. Because again, we learn it from the Gzer Sakosuf. So that's the model. The model is, it happens, it's a one-moment event. That causes the transition from A to B. But if the change takes place over a period of time, which ultimately causes the change, that is not the model of chazaka. No, so the two pshatim. In the Gemara, neither. Either it's because it's two against one, or it's because chosev asoy, one or the other. It's not even, no, he measured it a month ago. Hasn't been measured in a month. So the person assumed it's kosher mikveh. A day later they measure it, and they find out it doesn't have 40s. It doesn't have the required amount of water. So we have a question. Maybe yesterday, 2 days ago, maybe it did have. In the interim, maybe it became deficient.
Well, what happens if he wants to go into the mikvah, he has his measures, it's kosher, he goes in, and then 5 days later, he's discovering that the mikvah is not kosher.
What happens if you go into a restaurant and the delivery, it's kosher meat, and next week you find out kosher meat. Did you eat kosher meat? Okay, it's the same thing. If you measure the mikveh when it's a kosher mikveh, what happens 2 weeks later is irrelevant to him. Tosas holds that was Tosas difficult through Rashi. Chazaka does rule. Yanai on a Torah level was a kosher Kohen. Whenever you have a question, Chazaka rules. Whatever a question comes about and it's irresolvable, Chazaka rules on that question. Until the person went to the mikveh, there's no question on the mikveh. Until they measured it again. That's when the question came about. Right? They measured it, they found it was deficient. Now Chazaka comes into play. So the question is Chazaka sufficient? Reb Kiva says Chazaka is not sufficient. For one or two reasons. Either it's 2 to 1, but we say because it's not the model where we normally apply Chazaka.
How do you measure the amount of salt of the mikveh?
Something. It's a side question. Okay, Google it on whatever it is, .com, you'll find it. Mikveh USA. No, today firstly, it's much more, and they have a line. And it drops below that line. See, at one time a mikveh was the ground. See, it's interesting. There's a Rashba in the Nida. The halacha it's an important halacha. The Gemara says that if a mikveh leaks, now what's the difference between a mikveh and a mayom? The Torah says you could actually purify yourself one of two ways. Either by immersing yourself in a wellspring or a natural body of water where there's an underground spring, or a mikveh. What's the meaning of mikveh? Mikveh is yikova mayim. It's called ashborim. It's gathered. It's contained. Mikveh is contained. That is the profile of mikveh, and mayon flows. So a mikveh is supposed to be contained. What happens in mikveh? It's flowing because there's a leak. Let's say today you have a mikveh, and the water is flowing out of the mikveh. You have a leak in the wall of the mikveh. So it's possible. Now there's a question: how much has to leak out? How much has to leak out of the mikveh? So the Gemara says you have to have, it's called zechila nikeres. It has to be a recognizable leak. If it's not recognizable, it's what? Then even though it leaks, it's not a problem. So now, the Rashba says, how do we know? Where does it say? Factually, it's leaking. There is a degree of movement. Some water is leaking out. So he goes. So the Rashba says, at one time a mikveh wasn't tiled. So if it wasn't tiled, there's seepage in the ground. So if there's seepage in the ground, there's a degree of what? Of leaking. So therefore, you have to say, so when it says that zochel invalidates a mikveh, to what degree does it have to flow out? There has to be zechila nikeres. It has to be obvious that it's losing water. But if it's not obvious, it's not a problem. But today, the mikvahs are tiled, doesn't lose water, and you have more than enough, plus you have a line on the tile, so they know it's always above that line, so it's never a problem. But in the time of the Gemara, it's a case in the Mishnah. The Gemara speaks about a case, you have exactly 40 saw. One person goes to the mikvah, and he goes out of the mikvah. So if you have exactly 40, just the water on his body, he took some of the water out of the mikvah. You don't have a sufficient amount of water left. Someone has a shaila, what happens if a person immerses himself in the mikvah, and his foot is still in the mikvah, and the second person goes in? Do we say that since his foot is in the mikvah, we say all the water on his body, it's connected to the mikvah, so when the second person went in, it's as if you have the full 40 saw in the mikvah. We rule halachas. That's the review. The position is we say good achis, like you say regarding Shabbos. We say all the water flows down, so we see all the water on this body as if it's in the mikveh. But we rule like the Chachamim and say no. Factually, it has to be in the water. The water has to be contained as part of the water. We don't say it flows down, and therefore it's considered deficient. It's not a valid tefillah for the second person. Okay. Meno amin Allah. Okay? From where do we know? Rava says that the testimony of a single witness has no value whatsoever. Did none? Omer Reb Shimon Maseh bebeguro shel diskim. There was an incident in a spring of diskim. So Rashi says it's not a spring, but it's breicha shel mayim. It's a breicha, a pool of water. Initially, it had a presumed status. It was shleimo. It had 40 so. Umodadu v'nitzis chasero, and they measured it. They found it was less. It was lacking. Okay, now it's interesting. There's a machlok rishonim that a mayon, does a mayon require 40 so? We discussed this in Shabbos. We had this in Shabbos when we learned Shabbos. Does a mayon need 40 so? Mikveh definitely needs 40 so. It's Gemara in Eruvin we had. It's Gemara Sukkah we had. Right? Yeah, a well spring. Do you need 40 so? For tefillah, what do you mean for what? It's not for drinking. What? What? No, there's no read. The water that's under the ground, the water that's contained in the well, you measure. It's what? It's 40 so. It's less than 40 so. Or if you have a spring, it's less. You want to convert a child, or take a small child, which you don't need 40 so to cover its body. An adult, you need 40 so. But a child, let's say a small child, when they lived regarding the laws of Tumah V'Taira, a child had to be immersed in the mikveh. Otherwise, the child would contaminate. So there's enough water in the spring that you could cover the body of the child, of the small child. Is it a valid tefillah? It's machlok rishonim. Some rishonim say regarding shiur of arboim sof, there is no difference between a mikveh and a mayon. Others say no, that 40 so is limited to mikveh, not to mayon. Mayon does not need 40 so. So there's a beautiful stipler, Kilos Yaakov. He writes, he says, very interesting. Everybody agrees, Rabbi, I don't want you to miss this. Okay? The halacha is, there's a case in mikvos, you have, on the side of a mountain, you have steps. And each step has an indentation and has a pool of water. And each pool contains 20 so. Okay, so you have multiple steps, and now you have water flowing down the mountain that connects all the pools. Right? So you have, and we're not talking about driplets. It's a flow of water. So you have every one of the pools are connected. So if every pool is connected with the water flowing down the mountain, do we connect the pools and we say it's the equivalent of having 40 so, or do we say not? This is stationary water. It's water contained in the pool, right? We're talking rainwater. No. It's like snow melts on a mountain. So eventually, you have water flowing down the mountain. So you have pools of water which were made as a result of the melting snow. Now you have water flowing down the mountain. The water flowing down the mountain connects all the pools. And now you want to be tovel. Let's say you have a kli, a vessel. You want to be tovel that in one of the pools. For tefillas kelim, you also need 40 so in the mikveh. Do we say all these mikvos are connected because you have this stream of water flowing down the mountain, which connects all of them? Or do we say no? So the Mishnah says in mikvos, ketafras einu chibur. That ketafras means anything that flows in a downward motion is not a connection. Is not a connection. And therefore the pools, although physically the water's connecting them, it's not considered a connection. Because ketafras einu chibur. Okay? So there, the case in the Mishnah is speaking, it's flowing in a downward direction. It's like a waterfall. Person wants to be tovel, you have a waterfall, and you stand in the waterfall, and the water just keeps coming down on you. And in the gush of water, you have definitely 40 so. It's not valid. Why? Because since it's flowing, it's a movement, therefore it's not a valid tefillah. Although you're fully immersed in the amount of water, the gush of water that comes on you, and it's continuous. It's not a valid tefillah. It's not valid. So similarly, the water cascading down the mountain, connecting all the pools, is not considered a connection. Okay? So the stipend wants to say, what is an ocean or a river? It's continuous movement. Continuous movement. So when you have continuous movement, although the water, it's not driplets of water, but anything that moves, we don't see as one entity of water. It's not one entity. Something that's contained in a pool, let's say we call mikveh, because it's contained within the confines of the walls, it's one entity. But the moment something flows, we see each bit of water, each droplet, as a separate droplet. They happen to be seen as one because they're touching one another. But movement means it's not one entity. It's only one entity when it's contained within the confines of a location. It's stationary. Once it moves, it's not in one entity. So if that's the case, you could have endless amount of water in an ocean, but when you're tovel in an ocean, as much water as you have, you're just being covered by relatively infinite droplets of water. So therefore, you never have a shear. Even when you're tovel in the ocean, you have more than 40 saw, but you don't have a 40 saw because it's cataphrus. Every ocean is cataphrus, the equivalent of the waterfall. So therefore, that's the position why you don't need 40 saw in the Maya. Because even if you have 40 saw, you don't have 40 saw. Because even horizontal movement is no different than vertical movement. It's all the same. Movement doesn't allow the water to be seen as one entity of water. It is a mayim. The ocean is a mayim. Of course it's a mayim. It's a mayim. It's no problem. It's his movement. But he says even the ocean, it's not the shear of 40 saw. Of course, cataphrus is like causes that you cannot have the concept of shear. That is the basis. The others learn no. When it flows in the downward direction, that's where you see it as separate droplets. It's only the force of the movement. Therefore, you see it as one entity of water. But if it flows horizontally, no, that's one entity of water. Therefore, that's shear. The others say no. Movement means it's just the water's moving, and that's why they're touching one another. But factually, it's infinite droplets of water which are next to one another. Therefore, there's no shear. Yeah, it is tefillah, of course. Of course, the characteristic of ocean is mayim. That's its natural characteristic. No, a lake has also the different kinds of lakes. The man-made lakes. Lake is enclosed. You went to where? Which Mongolian colony you go to? Lake is enclosed. There are all kinds of. You ever hear Lake Erie? And okay, Lake Huron. They're lakes, right? Those lakes are underground. They have underground feeders. That's a mayim. Those lakes are mayim. Okay. When we learn makros, we'll learn the wave. Galshin itlash. It's a separate discussion. Yeah, but it's no longer part of the ocean. That's the problem. That's the problem. If you're in the ocean, the Gemara speaks about the Mishnah speaks about a galshin itlash. If you have a wave which comes off the ocean, detaches itself, and totally covers you with water, it's not valid. Yeah, but you see there, but the waterfall is coming from rainwater. It's from snow. There, it's detaching from an ocean. So in the ocean, you're in the ocean. You're in the mayim. But when the wave detaches itself, that wave is no longer part of the ocean. So therefore, it's not valid. That's the reason why it's not valid. Okay. So they measured it initially. They measured it. It had 40 saw. Then again, they measured it. It's chasero. So Tyrish and Naso Gabo Tafrim Matayr. All the Tyrish that were involved regarding that person who went to the mikveh, Reb Tafrim ruled they're all Torah. They're not contaminated. Reb Kiva Metamek. Reb Kiva contaminated everything. Because the person initially, what was his presumed status? It was Tamei. Om Reb Tafrim mikveh zeh b'cheske sholim hu omed. So Reb Tafrim says to Reb Kiva, how could you say that the person went to the mikveh, whatever he touches, he contaminated? The mikveh itself had a cheske sholim. Sofik atu, right? Hu omed. Cheske sholim hu omed. Sofik atobo lechasro. And now there's a question. You want to see it as deficient? Al techser in sofik. You have no right to see it as a deficient mikveh when the man went to the mikveh. Because the mikveh had a chazokah. We say chazokah meikor chazokah dehashto. You always go after the presumed status, which is the original chazokah. If that's the case, the person, when he immersed himself in the mikveh, was a valid mikveh. When the man went into the mikveh, because now we have a question, what mikveh did he go to? So because we're focusing on the mikveh. even though it has relevance to him, but what are we focusing on? What was the status of mikveh when he immersed himself? Was it deficient as now, or was it complete as originally? So Chazaka rules it was complete. If that's the case, what kind of mikveh did he immerse himself in? In a valid mikveh. We didn't speak about Reb Kiva yet. What you're saying, no. I'm not saying what you're saying. No. I'm saying, my question is, now that he comes out of the mikveh, and we have a question, what is our question? What mikveh did he immerse himself? No, I understand. But what's the basis for the question? What was the state of the mikveh that he went into? So there we're focusing on the mikveh. Although the ramification is himself, but what is my focus? What was the mikveh? So the mikveh is original and now. Chazaka rules on that. That's Reb Tarfon. If that's the case, we say he immersed himself in a kosher mikveh. Om Rebbe Akiva. Adam ze becheskes tomi omeid. You can't look just at the mikveh itself. The man himself has a cheskes tomi. That was his presumed status. Misofik atobol taro. And now I have a question. Because we have a question whether it was valid or kosher or not, you cannot rule that he's pure. Al tetarenu misofik. Therefore, you can't rule that he's tar. So do we look at the mikveh independent of the person and we say he went to a kosher mikveh? Or do we say that since he has a cheskes tumah and I want to change that status, you have no right to change it? Omreb Tarfin, Moshe lo-omeid u'makriv agab mizbeach. Okay? The person was a Kohen, he was officiating. Now the halacha is, the Torah says if a Kohen marries a Gerusha, what's the status of the child? He's a Cholol. Okay? A Cholol is not a Kohen. A Cholol, if he contaminates himself, he didn't violate anything. If he wants to marry a Gerusha, he can marry a divorcee. Any person, because Cholamin, he was Nasa Chulin, he was desecrated. Okay? He desecrated his seed. Okay? Let's say this person wasn't aware he was a Cholin, he officiated on the Mizbeach, and after he officiates, we find out he was a Cholin. His mother was a Gerusha. What is the status of the Avodah? Is it valid or not valid? So we'll see them of this Gzer Sakosov, that it says, Ufol Yodav Tirtzeh. That despite the fact that you find out later that he was a Ben Gerusha, the Avodah that he had done as a Cholol is a valid Avodah. So we see, he's still Zer Aaron. He's the Zer Aaron, but he's Cholol. So the Torah says, as long as you weren't aware at the time that he officiated that he was what? That he was a Cholol, the Avodah is valid. Zer Sakosov. Okay? V'nodu sheben Gerusha ben Chalutza. So it's not something that happened later. This is retroactive. Shavodosa Ksheira. The Avodah is kosher. It's valid. Even though seemingly Tosa says it's not comparable to our case. Let's say we know factually the mikveh was measured and the mikveh is deficient. Without a question. When he went, he thought it was a valid mikveh. And now witnesses come and testify the mikveh was not complete when he was tovel. What, Reb Tarfon would disagree? Reb Tarfon would agree that it's not a valid field. So how do you compare mikveh, the case of mikveh, to the case of Ben Gerusha ben Chalutza? They're not comparable, the two cases. Right? By Ben Gerusha ben Chalutza, even factually, he was Ben Gerusha when he officiated. It's valid. Here, if we know factually the mikveh was deficient when he was tovel, definitely it's not a valid tefillah. That's Tosa's question. Okay? We'll see. No, but I'm saying, factually, definitely. Correct. So you see, they're not comparable. They're not comparable. Because by mikveh, if the mikveh would be the equivalent of the Ben Gerusha, the tefillah is definitely not valid. Right? That's Tosa's question. So Tosa says a chiddush, according to one pshat, that was speaking about, he went to the mikveh, and he believed the mikveh at the time was valid, was a kosher mikveh. Later he realizes not, but in the meantime, he went and he officiated. He was a Kohen who went to the mikveh, and he officiated. So do we compare that case to Ben Gerusha ben Chalutza? Just as Ben Gerusha ben Chalutza, although we find out retroactively he wasn't a qualified Kohen. The halacha is we validate his avodah. Here also, if at the time that he was tovel, we believed it was a kosher mikveh, and he officiates, do we invalidate the avodah or don't we invalidate the avodah? No, but it's based on two. A Kohen's tummy officiates, it's not valid. But here it's within the... It should be no worse than Ben Gerusha ben Chalutza. Well, the question, maybe yes, maybe no. Right? That's the question. We see that the man is definitely not a qualified Kohen, and yet, since when he officiated, you believed he was qualified, same thing. You believed at the time he officiated that he was qualified to do the avodah because he was Torah. Turns out later we find out he's Tomei. Is that a sufficient reason to invalidate the avodah? No, the Gemara is going to cite 3 psukim. Nobody disagrees. Even Rabbi Akiva. No. Xeris HaKosov. He agrees, but he says the comparison is not a comparison. He'll give 2 reasons why the mikveh is not comparable to the case of Ben Grushim and Chalutza. Although I agree Ben Grushim and Chalutza, mikveh is a whole different case. Omer Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva says, you may compare it to that, but I compare it to something else. Based on my comparison, what's the halacha? We contaminate everything. Moshel Omein Umakra Gab Mizbech. Listen to the story. A person is officiating. V'noda Shu Balmum. And later it's revealed that when he did the avodah, he believed he wasn't a Balmum. He had a certain, whatever it is, a certain handicap. And later, and he officiates, later we find out that at the time that he did the avodah, unbeknown to us, or unbeknown to him, that he's a Balmum. Is there a question that we should not validate that avodah? Definitely it's invalidated. Correct? And even Reb Tarfon would agree to this. Agam Mizbeach v'nodol shu balmum shavodosa psula. No, different. There's one speaking specifically Ben Grushim and Chalutza, not balmum.
That seems closer to the qualification.
No. The differentiate between the Gemara says because one came about as a result external, because his father married a Grusha. That's why he's a chalum. The reason why in Balmum the deficiency is a physical deficiency which lies within the person himself. Right? The Xeris HaKosov is only, it's the seed of Aaron, someone messed up. The father married a woman he wasn't permitted to marry. Okay? He desecrated his seed, but it's still Zer Aaron. Here, the fact the man is deficient. The man has a handicap. He has a blemish. Just that we have another minute. Omer Reb Tarfon. So Reb Tarfon says to Reb Akiva, Atodi miso lebalmum. You compare this case to the case of the Balmum. Ani de misa of Ben Grusha or Ben Chalutza. I compare it to the other cases. Compared to the case of Ben Grusha and Chalutza, the avodah then the mikvah is considered Torah. But if you compare it to what, he says, let's see to who is it more. The case of mikvah to what is it more comparable to? Idon Ben Grusha and Chalutza. If it's comparable to Ben Grusha and Idon Ben Grusha and Chalutza. And therefore, it's not contaminated. Im dom about balmum, the dom balmum. Okay, so Reb Kiva will show what's more comparable. And even Reb Tarfon retracted, and he concurred with Rabbi Akiva. We'll see that tomorrow. Kaddish.